Sisters and brothers, for the time is ours to share together this Lord's Day with your prayers on Holy Spirit's help. I'd like to preach the 6th installment of our series entitled Minor Prophets, Major Messages, from the title, Major Courage. Amen. Major Courage. As many of you will remember, I spent 2 weeks this past summer traveling throughout Germany and Poland as a fellow in an ethics program that uses the actions of professionals during Nazi-occupied Europe as a lens for reflection on contemporary ethical issues. It was surely a life-changing experience. Going to places up until that point I had only studied about was completely eye-opening. It's one thing to read about a place, but it's quite another thing to experience it. And in Berlin, we stayed in a hotel that was around the corner from Checkpoint Charlie, the infamous crossing point in the Berlin Wall between East and West Berlin. Catty-corner from the hotel is what is now called the Topography of Terror. It's a museum. It is the former headquarters of the Gestapo and the SS, the police of the Nazi regime. Just across the street from the hotel are the ruins of Anhalter Bahnhof. It was a major train station that was bombed by the Allied forces during World War II that would have been similar to New York's Grand Central Station, where thousands of aged Jews were deported in broad daylight on regular train cars during the normal flow and traffic of a typical day. These sites of Nazi perpetration were and still are everywhere. They are around hotels, around banks, around businesses, around corner stores, around restaurants, around schools, around shopping malls, fully integrated in the landscape of a living, working, and breathing metropolis, as they were even during the height of the Holocaust. And one of the questions that kept coming to my mind over and over as I toured the city and saw these sites was, how? How could the Holocaust happen? How could something so terrible, so wicked, so evil happen? How could this happen with so many people around, right in the middle of a city? I'm afraid there is no easy, clear, clean-cut answer. This question of evil is one which humanity has been wrestling with for a long time, and is one which I'm confident we will continue to wrestle with for generations to come. And though much of the Holocaust is incomprehensible, much of it we still cannot wrap our heads around, it is still very much real. Whether or not we like it, whether or not we can explain it, it happened. We are still very much dealing with its consequences. The consequences, we're still dealing with the consequences of other mass genocides committed throughout history, including the genocide of Africans in the Ma'afa, also known as the transatlantic slave trade. And even the genocide of indigenous peoples of these yet-to-be United States that was celebrated last Monday on a holiday some call Columbus Day. In an attempt to help us reflect on these things and to never repeat them, ethicist and Christian cleric Richard John Niehaus wrote, "The Holocaust was not an abstraction we call a period of history, but a succession of mornings and afternoons and evenings much like today. It was a tangle of innumerable actions and consequences, of careers and ambitions, of fears and loyalties, of flirtations with the unthinkable turning into the routines of the unexceptionable." He writes, "It happened 1 hour at a time, one equivocation at a time, one lie at a time, and one decision evaded at a time."
Hallelujah.
In those times, in the everydayness of life, and the hustle and bustle both then and now, in the midst of the inconvenient evil that is still going on around us, God calls us, like Micah, to exhibit some major courage. And as we continue on in our sermon series entitled Minor Prophets, Major Messages, we come to this minor prophet, Micah, who is anything but minor, as he bore a major message from the Lord. This major message he had from the Lord, though what God called him to do was absolutely terrifying, and that is calling out the rulers, judges, and priests and prophets of his days, his major message against evil produced some major courage in him. As even in the midst of this terrifying assignment he had from the Lord, he stood to declare here in Micah 3:8, "But as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, and with justice and might." Make no mistake about it, sisters and brothers, we too, like Micah, live in dangerous times. We too have every reason to be afraid. We too, as the called out, called in, and called forth people of the living God, have a message from the Lord. The question becomes this morning, as we hear this major message from the minor prophet Micah, as we live in a world that would rather have us complicit, complacent, and cowardly, the question becomes, how do we live as convicted and confident Christians in the face of everyday evil? With all the problems that are going on around us, both in and outside of ourselves, how do we live with courage? I believe a good start to answering this question lies in the text today. If we are to live with the major courage that God is calling us to have, like Micah, we must first confront the reason for darkness. The text says in verse 5, "Thus says the Lord concerning the prophets who lead my people astray, who cry peace when they have something to eat, but declare war against those who put nothing in their mouths. Therefore it shall be night to you without vision, and darkness to you without revelation." You see, Micah lived in a time when darkness fell on his land. Judah had shifted from a bartering and trading economy to a monetary and mercantile economy. And as such, a large gap was formed. A huge divide was created between the rich and the poor. And now they had classes of people, the haves and the have-nots. And the haves did not care that the have-nots had not. They didn't care that people were poor. They didn't care that people didn't have the supplies or food they needed. They didn't care that people weren't able to eat. This elitist mentality crept over into their religious life. Their priests and their prophets treated their ministry as a business rather than as a divine calling. You see, in Micah's day, if you paid the priests and prophets enough money, they would tell you whatever you wanted to hear, whether or not it was actually a word from the Lord. These preachers were saying whatever the people's itching ears wanted to hear, just to make $1 off of their fears and hopes. To top it all off, Judah was getting into some hot and uncertain political waters, as they lived under the constant threat of foreign invasion. And church, this sounds familiar, doesn't it? Yeah. We too have a major class divide between the haves and the have-nots. The haves still do not care that the have-nots have not. As much of our national conversation centers around building the middle class. And there is no real talk about the poor except for the occasional mentioning of trickle-down economics that we all know never really trickles down to the folks who need it most. And not to mention that 84% of Puerto Rico still does not have power. have priests and prophets treating this gospel ministry as a business, selling prayer closets, bottles of miracle spring water, and personalized prophecies for the low, low price of $19.99. Peddling a prosperity gospel that cannot stand up in the face of a surface level reading of scripture, much less in the face of the real circumstances and tragedies of those who believe them. To top it all off, we too live under the constant threat of foreign invasion. As our world leaders keep ratcheting up the rhetoric around nuclear war, as our leader this week formally refused to recertify the nuclear deal with Iran. Since we live in a world much like Michael's, we still need people who have major courage. Like Michael, we too must confront the reason for the darkness in our land. Yes, the darkness is scary, but the darkness is real. And just because we close our eyes to it doesn't mean it will go away. Just because we change the channel on the TV doesn't mean it's going to stop. Just because we sweep it under the rug and delete the news app off of our phone doesn't mean that it's not going on. It doesn't work that way. As James Baldwin said, and as I've quoted many times his wisdom of his in his pulpit, you cannot fix what you will not fix. And acting as if everything is all right does not make it all right. As Micah says about those false priests and prophets, you will lead the people and yourself astray if you cry peace when there is no peace. Church, we must confront the reasons for the darkness because the house warned us that it happens. 1 hour at a time. One equivocation at a time. One lie at a time. One decision at a time. If we are to have some major courage, we have to confront the reason for darkness. Like Michael, we must be willing to confront it. We don't confront the darkness just to be confrontational, just so we can point out what's wrong. We don't confront the darkness so we can beat ourselves up or beat up somebody else. We do it so we can secondly catalyze the revelation of the dawn. Verse 8 says, but as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, and with justice and might. Church, if we are to have major courage, we must go beyond confronting darkness to catalyzing the dawn. In other words, if we are to have major courage, we must turn darkness into light. We cannot do this in and of ourselves, but we have to be filled. Like Michael, we have to be filled with power. Power in this instance, in this minor prophet of Micah, power comes from knowing who you are. And knowing who God called and created you to be and living fully into that. Micah knew exactly who he was. Scripture tells us in the very first chapter and verse of this book that he prophesied during the reigns of 3 kings in Judah. King Jotham, King Ahaz, and King Hezekiah. And with the major message that Micah had to share, you know that Micah had to be filled with power. Well, the reigns of 3 kings, he prophesied against the people who had the power. He prophesied against the rulers, the judges, the priests, and the prophets. And Micah stood outside of all of that as an outsider and stood flat-footed and prophesied to the nation. You have to realize that Micah wasn't a rich man. Micah wasn't an educated man. Micah wasn't a man of class and stature, but Micah was indeed a man of power. Micah was a man of power because he knew exactly who God called and created him to be, and he was confident in that. And he lived his life and prophesied unapologetically. That's where your power will come from too. Knowing and being who God created you to be. And living out your truth in light of God's truth unapologetically. Living it out in a world that would rather you fit in to go along and get along. Like Michael, we too have to be filled not only with power, but with justice and might. That Hebrew word there for justice is mishpat. And you know that word from the sermon on Hosea. That word means God's order, God's decision concerning a matter. It means to judge right. It means we don't allow our own personal advantage or our own personal bias get in the way of doing what's right. Being full of justice means putting our prejudices to the side. Putting our pettiness to the side. Putting personality differences to the side. And making the right decision. Being full of justice helps us avoid those poor decisions that add up one by one over time. And justice has to have might coupled with it. Because it's not just knowing what the right thing is. And it's not just knowing what you have the right to do. Because you can know the right thing and not do it. You can even have the right to do something that you shouldn't. But having major courage is doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. That's what it means to be filled with both justice and might. We must not only be filled with power, we must not only be filled with justice and might, we must be filled with the Spirit of the Lord. We cannot faithfully exhibit major courage without God's Spirit. We need God's Spirit to fill us. We need God's Spirit to hold us. We need God's Spirit to encourage us. We need God's Spirit to motivate us, to correct us, to keep us, to empower us. We can't do this by ourselves. We need God to do God's work. Because in order to have major courage, we must not only confront the reason for darkness. We must not only catalyze the revelation of the dawn, but thirdly and finally, we must confess the redemption of the deliverer. Micah says there in verse 8, "But as for me, I am filled with power, with the Spirit of the Lord, with justice and might, to declare to Jacob his transgression, and to Israel his sin." Since we are now at the halfway point of this sermon and Bible study series, Amen, come to Bible study on Wednesday, 12 o'clock and 6 minutes. I hope you have been able to pick up some patterns among these minor prophets with their major messages. These minor prophets were always saying something. They were always calling out somebody's sin. And to us, this may seem shocking because we don't do much of that anymore. It's important that we consider the reason why these prophets did it. As one biblical scholar puts it, the prophets were not social reformers. The prophets were preachers. They were prophets. They were not professors or politicians. The prophet's job was to be an alarm. Their job was to issue a warning. Their job was to let people know something bad is going on. If you don't get out now, something bad is going to happen. Growing up in school, we had these things called fire drills. And they would happen a few times every school year. The course of a regular school day, the building's fire alarm would go off. Lights would start flashing and the sirens would start blaring. Because the fire alarm was sounded, we knew we had to get out of the building. Sometimes we didn't know if it was really a drill or not because the cafeteria had a bad problem of always burning something. But we knew because the fire alarm sounded. If we wanted to survive, we had to get out and get to our assigned safe place. Because if we didn't, something bad was going to happen. The building might actually be on fire this time. And somebody might get hurt if we ignore it. Well, I stopped by Community Baptist Church this morning to stir somebody up to some major courage. I stopped by Community Baptist Church this morning to tell somebody to confront the darkness. I stopped by Community Baptist Church this morning to tell somebody to catalyze the dawn. I stopped by Community Baptist Church this morning to tell somebody to confess redemption in the deliverer. I stopped by this church this morning to tell somebody to sound the alarm, to issue a warning, to tell the people that something bad is going on, to tell the people that something terrible is going on, to tell the people that something evil is going on. But I stopped by to tell somebody that there is a safe place. There is a way out. There is a way over. There is a safe place. For over 2,000 years ago, an alarm was sounded. A warning was issued. If something didn't happen, humanity would die in its sin. The world would have given up and the evil would have won. But out on Calvary's cross, the word of another prophet rose up among them, and Jesus, on whom the Spirit of the Lord was upon, to preach the gospel to the poor, to heal the broken heart, to set the captive free, to recover the sight of the blind, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. This Jesus died on the cross, and he died because the world was filled with evil. He died because the world refused to listen. He died because the world rejected goodness. But because we serve a God who is rich in mercy, because we serve a God who is rich in compassion,